In Module 1, now that you have completed the state regulations research, I want to address two things. One of you specifically told me in your comments of your assignment that this was really overwhelming. And you're right, it is. That is actually one of the main points of this assignment. I wasn't trying to just send people down a rabbit hole, but I wanted you to understand the complexity of state regulations, and appreciate the difficulty in how hard it is to find the information and figure it out. So appreciate that. You know, when you are in a history class or an American government class and you're talking about federal versus state government and state rights, this is how it plays out. I'm not advocating for it one way or the other. I'm just wanting you to see this is how that information that you learn in your American government class, when you talk about state rights versus federal government control and all this anti-control stuff, or the pro-control and pro-regulations, these are the pros and cons. This is the reality. This is how it impacts your life and your potential career and profession. So it's just good to know and good to appreciate this kinds of reality. Also, hopefully you guys saw the variety of teacher qualifications and the variety of ratios. Both of these particulars of state regulations and mandates really are driven by Head Start research. And that's because Head Start is really where we've had a lot of children in care and been able to really look at what best environments look like for young children, and as well as teacher qualifications and what those need to look like. And so since most of the research has been housed in Head Start, that's what's driving a lot of your state regulations. In the last 20 years, the research has been able to move out of just Head Start research and looked at other programming too for young children, which is wonderful. And the Head Start funding has really increased. I want to first point out your ratios for Head Start. Here under number 2, you will see that they talk about serving children under 36 months. Because of this idea of continuity of care. We will explore this concept later, but essentially what this concept of continuity of care is pulling on is that we know, based on brain research, based on research of how infants and toddlers best learn and develop, it is not about activities. It is not about socialization, but instead it's about responsive and reciprocal relationships, primarily with the caregivers, and then how the caregivers facilitate that with the other children with which the infants and toddlers are surrounded by. Continuity means it's the same. It does not change. I think especially in rural communities, you will find that we love small centers and family providers because of the family atmosphere, because of the continuity in the care. Early Head Start does not divide their children out from infants and toddlers, or infants and mobile infants and toddlers, which is how a lot of centers function, right? But instead, children are in the same room with the same teachers, with the same children for the first 36 months, 3 years of their life. And that matches best practices. So Early Head Start says there must be 2 teachers and no more than 8 children. So that'd be like a 1-to-4 ratio. But even if you have 5 children, you still have to have 2 teachers. If you have 2 children, you have to have 2 teachers. So in Early Head Start, you definitely need to have more infants and toddlers, but that's also why it's easier to maintain numbers, because you have a wider age group. Okay, but if you can have a maximum of nine children, but you have to have 3 teachers, and that matches Kansas ratio of 1 adult to 3 infants with a maximum of 9 in a room. And that's just infants in Kansas. That does not include your older children. So this is all really good information about perspective, and that's all we're trying to do here is draw on perspective and think about quality of care. Can you really truly care for 6 infants, which we saw from at least one state? 6 infants in one classroom. I think that was Oklahoma. Can you imagine? And I saw in other states 5. 4 is questionable. I believe, in my professional and personal opinion, I would never leave my baby in a room with 1 adult and 5 other infants, or 5 other infants and toddlers. That just, the stress of that adult. Wow. When you look at the preschool ratios, they're much more similar to what we likely see at our state levels. And there's probably less dramatic ratios differences here. And so again, Head Start, they have to have 2 teachers, whether it's 2 leads or a teacher and an assistant, which is referring to teacher qualifications for Head Start. You'll notice the ratio is slightly lower if the majority of the children are 3-year-olds. And so they have a chart here. So I just wanted to expose you to this. Last but not least, I'd like you to hopefully take a couple minutes, look at the Kansas Child Care website. Take a minute to listen to Dr. Lee Norman. Really a cool guy. He's a doctor. He still is active in the reserves of the military, incredibly smart, incredibly driven, and we have been so lucky in Kansas to have him leading our Department of Health and Environment during this pandemic. He sends a great message to you guys as essential providers and workers in our communities. And then there's some resources down below that I'd encourage you to look at and think about potentially sharing with your coworkers, if you have staff and you're a director, or with families as you see appropriate, but some great resources here.